This is not an assisted dying bill. It is an assisted suicide bill. As a society, we believe that suicide is wrong. The government has a national suicide prevention strategy. We bemoan the number of young people who are lured into committing suicide by social media and what they read on the internet. This week is World Suicide Awareness Week. Suicide is wrong, but this bill effectively says suicide is okay. What message does that give to our society? Suicide is not okay. Suicide is wrong. This bill is wrong. And in my opinion, it should not pass.
Yeah. My little friend Baroness May of Maidenhead told us how her friend referred to the bill as a licence to kill bill. She's right. It gives the state a licence to kill the wrong type of people. My lords, I am the wrong type. As the noble Lord Falconer pointed out in his speech, there are savings to be made should assisted dying be introduced. This bill effectively puts a price on my head. Indeed, should it become law and precedents set elsewhere apply in the UK over time, then I face the realistic possibility as a severely disabled person of being killed as a result of legislation passed by this House. As my noble friend Lord Harper reminded us, no organisation of or for disabled people supports the bill.
The ill are very vulnerable. I've recently been diagnosed with aggressive cancer and my treatment starts this week. My prognosis is excellent. I have every advantage. I have a strong faith, I have a loving family, I have an interesting workplace and good colleagues and a supportive community and enough money and underlying good health and indeed excellent treatment, I should say. But there have been some very low moments in the past few weeks when I've realised the burden I am to my family, who are currently arguing who should take next week off to look after me, and also my concerns about watching me suffer, as well, of course, as my own fear, frankly, of pain and loss of control. I watched that final debate in the Commons, and what struck me was that woman after woman, ethnic minority after ethnic minority, disabled people stood up and said, this bill is not good enough for my vulnerable community. My lords, please don't write me letters and messages. I'm drowning in kindness. Instead, I ask you to think hard about me with all my advantages feeling like a burden. Just briefly, not all the time, don't worry, I'll be back this time next year bouncing around. But I ask you to think instead of messaging me. Think about the vulnerable and how easy it is for them to feel that their lives are not worth living.
Yeah. If you have an eating disorder, that is in fact a mental health condition which is not covered by Clause 2, Part 2 of the current bill as it stands, because voluntary suspension of eating and drinking is not the same as an eating disorder. They are two different things, and it's important to distinguish those. I do not pretend that this is easy for anybody, and I do not pretend that it is easy to find us all in this House taking incredibly seriously the fact that if we get this bill wrong, people die who should not die at the stage they will die. Now that's one of the reasons, I think one of my noble colleagues has already expressed, why your Lordship's House came to the view many years ago that capital punishment was wrong. I hold that same view now about this bill, and I speak with intense pain, actually, and love for those who've made eloquent and heartfelt cases to end the suffering of those who are terminally ill. I understand that, but this bill actually isn't worded so as to end suffering. It's worded so as to end life, and I think we have to draw that distinction. If it was a bill about ending suffering or alleviating suffering, then the provisions of the terminally ill adults brackets end of life close brackets bill would be about palliative care, and they are not.
If we do this, we unleash into our society a fundamental change in our relationships. The relationship between death and life, between doctor and patient, between parent and child, between citizen and state. And I saw this firsthand in Canada last year, where priest after priest told me heart-rending stories of people choosing an assisted death because it was better for their family than spending an already meagre inheritance on expensive care, and sometimes feeling forced into this choice, they felt it was their duty to die. I know this is not what we want here, but this is what we are proposing. Do we seriously think that if this bill was passed, palliative care won't be detrimentally impacted, or that 6 months won't in due course become 12?
I especially worry what message this sends to the young, already often nihilistic and prone to anxiety, self-harm and mental health problems. When we debated the censorious Online Safety Act, those of us who raised its negative impact on free speech were metaphorically slapped down, hectored that one indisputable reason for that law was to close down suicide sites, something echoed by the Prime Minister only yesterday, and we had to protect the young from malign online suicide influencers. But I worry this bill that we're debating today is a legislative embodiment of a suicide influencer. What do we think will happen when we tell newly franchised teens that in some instances taking your own life equates to dying in dignity? Saying it's restricted to those with terminal illnesses just won't wash with a generation immersed in the language of rights and entitlements. Why not assist me when I'm suffering so much? Why am I being discriminated against?
I believe we are adding to suffering by introducing massive anxiety to patients at the most vulnerable time of their lives. Our mailbags have been characterised by messages from disabled people, the elderly and others who feel a sense that they are no longer valued by society, surplus to requirements, mere cost centres. I know this is not the intention of the sponsors, but that is the inevitable outworking.
The committee stage from the start in the other place was stilted in its composition, and the fact that many respected institutions that will be operating in the space of this bill were denied their opportunity for input. But I think what worried me more than anything else was the joyous, the tear-flecked celebrations by some parliamentarians of the passing of the bill in the Commons, which is a bill of death. I found that quite bizarre. I found that quite chilling. But then I suppose I shouldn't be surprised, as many of the same people are jubilant in a similar way for the opportunity to home conduct abortions up to full term without sanction. I rather celebrate life rather than death.
I worry too about the economics of healthcare under this bill, that assisted dying will be fully funded in our overstretched NHS, while palliative care is only partly funded, as Lord Stevenson of Birmingham highlighted last week. Choice is squeezed out in such a scenario. I do not wish to see a future where palliative care withers on the vine, while assisted dying becomes the default and cheaper option.
Let me say a word about an absent friend, the High Court judge, who we were told when this bill was introduced would stand as guardian to make sure everything worked as it should. But our judges have their work cut out making sure that we live in peace, and they didn't like the idea of having to make sure that we die in peace as well. And so the High Court judge has gone to be replaced what's now been rather euphemistically called an expanded panel. Well, it has been expanded in that there were more people on it, but it's been diminished because one member does not have to be a judge. A King's Counsel is sufficient. Now, I'm the last person to denigrate the ancient and honourable status of one of His Majesty's Counsel learned in the law, but the fact is there is now no minimum period of practice before you apply to take silk, and it's also not immediately apparent to me why a barrister of, say, 12 years call who's taken silk last week can be on the panel, but the senior partner of an international firm of solicitors cannot. The truth, I suggest, is that this judicial panel falls between two stools. It is too complex for the normal, straightforward case, while it is not equipped with anything like sufficient powers for the more difficult cases. I'm not sure what the answer is, or even if there is an answer, but the current proposal, I'm afraid, is neither fish nor fowl. It is something of a statutory red herring.
Throughout, we've heard horror stories of bad care, inadequate or appalling management, especially out of hours. The bill doesn't require any attempt to relieve pain or suffering, even if they're present. It puts the power in the hands of the two assessing doctors, who may know nothing about the conditions of the person, who cannot detect undue influence or coercion, and whose motivation may be opaque. Prognosis is a guess, and diagnostic errors are common. These doctors do not need to be certain. Only on the balance of probabilities do they need to believe the criteria are met. With no oversight of their assessment, how can a panel approve the death with any certainty when there is no ability to appeal against a panel approval and no coroner oversight? How many wrongful deaths a year is acceptable? No system can be 100% safe.
I wanted to finish by telling you the story of this Swiss 72-year-old woman who had put her name down with Dignitas, but she never made it because COVID happened. So she did not die. Soon a neighbor moved in, she met him, liked him, they fell in love and they married.